Hello, good evening, and a warm welcome to our Wednesday show and tell webinars. So, I'm Raki Chabria, and I'm the founder of Teachers Help Teachers. And Wednesdays, particularly, are days which are meant for sharing, where we invite educators like you all who have done a lot of work in your respective field, in your subject of specialization, and you would like to share your knowledge openly with the community. So, this is what Wednesday show and tell videos, webinars are all about. We also sometimes post videos, short videos, which are made by educators, and we post it on our platform to share knowledge. And sometimes we also invite educators to share their knowledge in their respective field. And today we have Shruti Gupta with us. Thank you, Shruti, for joining us. I'm sure your passion has led you join us to share your knowledge. A little brief about Shruti. She has done her MSc in Child Psychology from Nottingham Trent University, UK, and BA in Psychology from Flame University, Pune. After completing her master's, she got certified as an arts-based therapist from WCCL Foundation. She has further trained as a remedial educator from Prakulta. She has worked as a remedial educator at Maharashtra Dyslexia Association and is currently working at Bombay Cambridge School, Mumbai. So we welcome Shruti Gupta on our platform Teachers Help Teachers, where we share knowledge, we help each other, and as a community, we are all together to be able to come up with ideas and suggestions that can help. And today's topic is something which is very, very relevant because there are so many educators, especially the early years educators, who write to us and who tell us that what is it that we can do to cope up with children with special needs, especially learning disabilities. How do we identify? I'm a special educator myself, and I have worked in the field of autism. My forte is autism, and I've worked with children with mental retardation and learning disability. And believe me, every child is different. And as an educator, as a special educator, it's so challenging to meet the needs of those children. And I can imagine as a regular educator how difficult it is in the classroom without the knowledge of maybe you do have the knowledge but without the practical experience. How is it that you can cope up with the child? And disability as a word is something that I often dislike to use because I feel that we all are disabled in some way or the other. In some phases or the other, we do feel disabled. And it is something that can happen to us any point in time in life. So, disability as a word by itself is something that I avoid using. And children with special need is something that we use to address children with difficulties as well. So, Shruti, today we're going to be discussing about what is it that as educators, as early years educators, as primary year educators, secondary year educators, what is it that we can do, and what are the quick strategies if we could share with our audience and help them take those strategies back to their classroom. So over to you, Shruti.
Thank you so much, Rakhi ma'am, for inviting me on this platform. It's really a privilege and an honor
It's
to
all
be
our
here.
pleasure.
um, so, like she rightly said in her introduction, that learning disability is is a word which can be replaced with, like special. We can call them specially abled or specially gifted children. That's the more correct term to use. And we can teach them in a way that they learn, because that's what is something that we should aspire to as teachers. Teach the child the way that they learn rather than teach the way that we know how to teach. So that's something which is extremely difficult to implement, but we can all strive towards it each day. Even in my work, I keep improving, I keep experimenting and getting to find out what works with each child, because as it's rightly known that each child is unique and very, very different. So I want to keep the platform extremely open Um, Teachers, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat box. We will address it as and when we get the time along the way. And also, I have a short presentation. At the cost of being repetitive, I just want to very, very quickly introduce what is learning difficulties, what kind of learning difficulties do you see in the classroom. So I'm just going to share my screen. Is it visible?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the two learning difficulties that we're going to cover today are dyslexia and ADHD, because these are the most common ones in the classroom. I'm going to start with what is dyslexia, because yeah. So as you can see on the slide, dyslexia actually comes under the umbrella term of specific learning disability, SLD, and there are three main types. So there's impairment in reading, which is dyslexia, impairment in written expression, which is dysgraphia, and there's impairment in mathematics, which is dyscalculia. So dyslexia is mainly difficulties with reading, which also impacts writing and spelling, but it is predominantly difficulty with reading. Reading is extremely slow and effortful. The child tries to take shortcuts by guessing the word. There's a lot of reversal of letters. So bat is read as dat and things like that. There's a lot of difficulty with comprehending the text which has been presented. So dyslexia comes from the word dys, which means difficulty, and lexia, which means language. Dysgraphia is difficulty with spelling and also with sentence construction. The sentences will be very poorly constructed. There would be no punctuation, no gaps. The child would be extremely disinterested in written tasks. Some of the common spelling mistakes, as you can see, busy would be spelled with a Z, said would be spelled with SED. Words like help would be jumbled up, the letters would be mixed up. So this is a sample of what a dysgraphic child's text would look like. As you can see, there's no sizing, there's no spacing, there's no size consistency, or like letter formation is not proper. They're not following the lines and the margins. So we will deal with how to work around this later on in the presentation. Dyscalculia is difficulty with math problems. It's because children often reverse the numbers. So 59 would become 95. Confusion with signs. So plus would be seen as a multiplication or vice versa. Subtraction would look like a division sign to them. You know, they would miss out on decimal points. They would um, skip on steps while solving the problems. They would not remember math facts such as tables, and it requires a lot more work. So now, just an example quickly of how math problems can be extremely confusing. So this math problem, Ravi weighs 20 kilos more than Harsh. Surya weighs 30 more than Harsh. And Surya weighs 100 kilos. So what is Harsh's weight? So if you see the keywords, right, which we identify, more actually suggests addition. But in this problem, the student is actually expected to subtract, not add. And this 20 kilos is just a distractor when what they need to do is just subtract 30 from 100 to get Harsh's weight. So one of the important math facts that one of the important dyslexia facts that I want to really bring out to the teachers today is that it is not related to low IQ at all. A child with dyslexia would either have average or above average IQ, and that is why it is not right to label them as idiot or dumb or any of these terms, because it's really not their fault. It is a neurological disorder. It runs in families. It's genetic. It does not go away with time. It's not a vision problem which you can correct with glasses, and it's not something which can be cured with medicine. um, so now, why is it really difficult for a child with LD? First of all, because they're not understood. There is not much awareness. Parents don't understand them. Teachers at times don't understand them. They are called things such as lazy or slow. So they themselves know that something is wrong with them compared to their peers, and they suffer from low self-esteem. But calling them names just makes them much more frustrated. And at times, till the time they reach fifth standard, they've given up completely on academics. Their motivation to study is almost zero. So please try to be more empathetic towards them so that we can help them much better. What can I do as a class teacher? What should I do? First of all, reach out to a remedial teacher for help, because that's always going to be the best solution. Get the child's vision and hearing just checked so that it's ruled out. Sometimes there's wax in the ear which affects the hearing skills, or the child needs glasses which affects the vision, and that's why they're not able to copy properly. So just rule that out. Um, Speak to the school for support. So now coming to what a remedial teacher does. So what I do is I teach in a multisensory way using sight. So they see the word, they write the word on the desk, they sky write, they write in sand. They use a lot of senses. Your sight, your hearing, your tactile, the way they have to speak and pronounce the word. All this makes a big impact on their learning. Um, English can be taught through phonics. And now there's a lot of research which says that this makes it much easier for the child to pick up reading and spelling skills, because it breaks down, the rules, the spelling rules. So something like, as you can see on the screen, AI makes the A sound. For example, in rainbow. So it's spelled with RAIN. Or double E makes the E sound. Or, like things like NG makes the ing sound. Q and U stick together like glue. Yeah. So things like that. They need to be explicitly taught to a child with dyslexia. A remedial teacher also helps with study skills in the fifth, sixth standard onwards, and also with exam provisions. Now, as teachers, I would just take 2 minutes to explain what are the provisions that are provided to a child with dyslexia after he or she has been diagnosed by a certified body such as Sion Hospital or Nair Hospital in Bombay. So after they give the certificate, a child can avail some or all of these. So things like exemption from second language, whether it's Hindi or Marathi, whatever they choose to drop, extra time during exams, lower level math, or the option of a vocational subject. Also, they can avail a reader and writer, which makes life much easier for them, because they don't have to worry about, making mistakes while reading the question wrong, or while writing, they don't have to worry about spelling. So it's not a crutch that they're depending on. It's just something which helps them, and it's fair to use because they're having difficulties in these areas. So now, I think this is the most important part which teachers are looking for through this talk today. The questions that frequently come up from teachers is that, especially in the primary section, how do I teach tricky words? How do I teach sight words? So let's take ARER as a simple example. If I have to teach this word to the student, I would first show them a card like this. I would tell them to look at the spelling, say the spelling out aloud, sky write the spelling, so ARER, desk write the spelling, ARER, tap on their arm, ARER, and then write it on a piece of paper.
Maybe you could
So
stop
by,
sharing the screen and show.
sorry, okay. Yeah, so I'll just repeat that again. So if I have a word, a tricky word or a sight word which needs to be learned by heart, and it does not follow the phonetic rules, so something like this. So we can print it out on a card. So it would be easier for the child to work one word at a time. So something like R if we are doing. So what I would do is I would ask the child to see the word. So it's ARER. ask the child to say the spelling out aloud, A-R-E-R, then sky write it, so A-R-E-R. I would then ask the child to desk write it on the desk, so A-R-E-R, and then ask the child to tap it on their arm, A-R-E-R, and then ask the child to finally write it on a piece of paper so that they, with repetition and through multisensory way of practice, they will be able to get the word much simpler. Some words, so I can give you an example of one of my child who has spelling difficulty with spelling. So words such as WITH, with, she constantly gets confused and she spells it with WHITH because she thinks that all words have WH because of what, when, who, those words have the WH. So we made a mnemonic because she loves horses. So I've used this personalized mnemonic. Where is the horse? So now she has to look at the first letter of this phrase, where is the horse? Just the first letter. So WITH. So this is also one way of learning difficult spellings, which is generally done as a remedial teacher. But in case you have a child whom you work with after school for an hour or half an hour, and you have, like you have to develop a plan to how to get the child to learn. So this is something that you can try out or even suggest to the parent to do. What can also be done is mispronounce some words. So I'll just share my screen again. So if you see on the slide, so something like busy can be spelled with a pictorial representation of a bus and then the Y after that. That's busy. Also, a child can imagine bicycle with like make it as funny as memorable with a penguin sitting and riding the bicycle, and dividing the word into three parts. So by BICYCLE. So three parts, and then remember it that way because these kids really do well with pictures and representations. Also, learning to break the word into syllables really helps. So one way of syllabification is to put your arm under your chin and kind of say the word, and you can, every time the jaw touches the chin, it's a new syllable. So that's how you can teach the child how to syllabify the word. Um, the second thing is, how do I teach phonics? Um, so the good place to start with is um, to teach short vowel sounds. So I'll just show you how I do it. So short vowel sounds is a good place to start with, especially in the junior KG level. So A says A for apple. E says E for elephant. I says I for ink. O says O for orange. U says for umbrella. So now in this, I would also show how my lip is moving, how in A, my mouth is opening, it's a loud sound. In E, it's a soft sound, so I would say eh. In I, it's the I sound, as if you're smiling. So I. And I would keep this in front of the child who's having difficulty so that he can refer to the sounds and practice the short vowel sounds. So the long vowel sounds are where the letter says its name. So angel, so A, ear, ice cream, open, uniform. So now there are spelling rules where the vowel says its name. So we would practice that with some jingles. So if A and I, a vowel team, is walking together, the first one does the talking. So A and I go walking, the first one does the talking. So it's the A sound. And I would show them videos. YouTube has some amazing videos, which I would show them to practice this skill. I would use worksheets, all sorts of things, develop games. We changed the Ludo game into a board in which the child has to spell a word to proceed further. So we had the beginning blend. So suppose I've written BL on each block of the game, of the Ludo game. The child has to make a word starting with the blend bl. So that would be black, and then the child can proceed further. Or a word ending with NG. So king, and then the child can move further. So something like that can be done in remedial teaching. Um, I will come to more practical solutions which you can use in the classroom a little bit later after I address these questions. So, at how do I improve handwriting skills? So this is one thing which is frequently asked, and if you've seen the sample of the handwriting, I'm sure it's extremely difficult for any teacher to decipher what the child has written. So it is a real concern. What I would say is start with tracing letters, the letters which are not correctly formed. Make the child trace the letter, teach the correct way to write the letter in a book, and practice that. The second thing I would do is teach the child that all the letters need to have the same size. So have the four-lined book, even if the child is in grade 4 or 5 or 6, doesn't matter. Have the four-line book so that the child will be able to keep the letters the same size. Um, Also teach the child that there needs to be a one finger space between two words. So the child has to consistently be told that, keep space between two words. Start from the margins, capitalize each letter. Each new sentence needs to begin with a capital letter. Keep a full stop at the end of each sentence. Um, Things like this need to be taught, and you will see a big difference in the child's handwriting. I would also say that uh, some children need to practice, fine motor skills need to be improved. So an occupational therapist really helps with those skills. There are some exercises that they can do to improve their pencil grip. So they can even practice tapping their fingers and opening and things like that to just kind of improve the dexterity. Also they can use pencils like this with any a broader grip, so that the handwriting becomes much better with a broader grip pencil. The posture is really important. Some children, they literally sleep on their desk and they write, so that is not going to improve their handwriting skills. They need to sit straight, they need to hold the paper with one hand, and then they need to write with the other hand. um, so again, to revise what all things you need to keep in mind. One is the pencil grip, whether they're putting too much pressure, too less pressure, that needs to be corrected. The child needs to be taught how to hold the pencil correctly. The child needs to be given accommodations like a broader grip, um, with these accommodations which are available in the market, or like even putting a rubber band around the pencil helps with grip. Body posture needs to be correct. Spacing between letters, letter formation needs to be practiced, letter size needs to be consistent, punctuation and capitalization needs to be kept in mind. So, hope this helps the teachers out there. The next question is, at what age is reversals a concern? I would say that in junior KG and senior KG, a lot of kids have difficulty with reversals. So that's fine. But if you see after grade 1 that the child is still continuing with reversals, then it definitely needs to be addressed. Um, it uh, it This is not the only criteria for diagnosing a child with dyslexia, so please don't do that. It is just one of the points to diagnose. Um, it can be worked upon, and this is something which at grade 1 the teacher should bring to the attention of a remedial teacher. Also, in junior KG, I've seen that a lot of children have difficulty with telling the alphabets in a sequence. A B C D, they will not be able to say in a sequence. They'll keep getting fumbled with the sequence. So this is also an indicator that the child might have some learning concerns, because sequencing is really important in learning spellings. Um, so keep that in mind, teachers. Early signs of identifying difficulties. Um, Also, they'll have difficulties with rhyming words. So just keep in mind, junior KG, senior KG teachers, if they're not able to rhyme, just bring that to attention and just give them a little bit more support. Um, Going to the next big topic, I cannot explain a lot about how to teach math, but a few pointers. Mm, what helps is if the child visualizes the word problem. If there's a word problem, the child can visualize what's happening while reading and kind of make a representation with a drawing or a diagram, what is expected of them. And then they can use estimation that, okay, if the child has spent 10 rupees on Cadbury, 5 rupees on milk, and 5 rupees on pens, what will be the total? So just estimation helps that, okay, total should be more than these numbers, right? So the child knows that while adding, the sum has to be greater than these numbers. So that sort of a thing helps. Color coding. So if the child is doing a plus addition, the child kind of puts it in a different color so they know that, okay, this is addition. The child can be given a list of keywords such as what are the different terms for sum, add, total, put together. All these terms signify addition. So a list can be provided so that the child knows what to do. The child can be taught to check each step to see if they have done it correctly or not. And there are many more strategies in math, but because of the time limit, I'm just going to stick to these. The next question is, what is an IP? Which is asked because nowadays everybody knows these terms like individualized education plan, IP. That's what it stands for. It is something which is personalized to each student. It accommodates the child's strengths and weaknesses, keeping in mind what sort of a learner the child is. And it also um, is a plan for 6 months or 1 year. So in my IP, I would have reading goals. So reading goals would be teaching sight words, teaching reading comprehension, improving the child's vocabulary is part of that. Teaching how to summarize the chapter, that would be part of it. Then in my spelling skills, I would teach things such as blends, what are the long vowel sounds. So suppose A and I makes A sound, AY makes A sound. So I would have flashcards and I would show the child that these are some of the rules. And in the math skills, again, I would teach math facts. I would practice the sums. I would practice some other word problems, decoding, and things like that. And I would do writing skills in which I would try and improve the child's sentence construction, do mind maps so that the child is able to ideate much better, and practice these skills with the child. So that's, I think, from my side for dyslexia. And I have a few classroom tips which we constantly give to teachers in the school that I work at. So one thing is that you provide the child a front row seating because that's really important to monitor the child's work. Provide them with a helpful partner so that the child is able to copy from them if they've missed out and the board is erased, so they can complete their work in the recess. Do not force the child to read out aloud in class because that really hampers their self esteem. Never scold them in class because that's another thing which is really going to affect them. Motivate the child at every opportunity, give them extra time to complete schoolwork, provide them with help reading questions during exams if they don't have a reader writer yet, so just help them out. Allow the child to answer orally in case of severe disability. um, Multisensory teaching. uh, I know that it's not possible in the classroom environment, but this is how it looks like. It might be possible in the younger age group, using clay, using foam, using this glitter to write, sand writing, with pencil bottles, bottle caps, they can write on it, and just tracing. So it can be helpful if the child is given a little bit leeway with grammar and just assessed on content. They're big picture thinkers, so give them the main idea before getting into details of anything like science or history, geography. Some of my kids are really interested in science, my kids with dyslexia, and they really do well in geography or science or whatever their interest is, because they're so curious to know and learn more, that they compensate, for the lack of reading skills, but they still compensate because they listen attentively in class, and they're able to do really much better in those subjects rather than Hindi or English, which is completely a language based uh, assessment. Some kids really help, it helps because these kids are so good with visual representation, something like mind maps, which connects the main ideas. These are study skills which is beneficial for grade 5 onwards till 10. Important, highlight the important details, make them write bullet notes so that they prepare for the exams, teach them study skills, study strategies. Yeah. So, if
We
there are
can't
any
see your
questions,
screen, Shruti. Yeah.
okay,
You were
sorry.
sharing something?
Yeah, there was a presentation. Sorry about that. I
Just,
I
I
hope
think, the last slide, yeah.
it was still clear, right? If there are any questions related to dyslexia at this point, um,
Yes, so we do have a question on our YouTube channel where Shell Tiwari is asking if a child can leave additional language in case of learning difficulty. If the child can opt out of a language, then how will I teach my other languages if he or she is facing LD problems?
so
Did
okay,
not
so
really understand the question, but
yeah,
what
yeah,
I
so
think what she meant was that if a child is allowed to drop a language, then in that case, what happens about the second and the third language?
okay, so the second language is compulsory. The third language can be dropped. This is
Dropped, yeah.
across SSC and ICSE boards. What happens is that they can choose between Hindi or Marathi, whichever is better for them, slightly better. They pick that one. This is done so that the pressure is reduced. Three languages is just too much pressure, but two languages, because they're not scoring subjects, a language is difficult for them to score in. I don't know if they're saying that Hindi and Marathi have the same script, so how do I teach? I think that's something we're not very clear on. um, but yeah, it's mainly done to reduce the pressure on them. That's what it is. So can we proceed to ADHD then?
So I think more or less, when it comes to children with disability, it is all about the remedial measures that we can take. Because what happens in the classroom, we all know that learning disabilities arise from neurological differences, and what happens is early years remedial measures, if taken at the right time, will help the child to get better. I would not say overcome the difficulty, but it would help the child to cope up better. And sometimes it also helps if the child is allowed to probably repeat a class in the early years. So that also helps in case the school and the parents are comfortable, and you just want the child to have more hands-on practice with fine motor, gross motor skills, and before going to grade 1. So that is also a possibility, provided that the teacher or the mother, they are able to identify, and they are okay, they have accepted the problem. Because once there is acceptance, uh, you will soon see plethora of options that will open up in front of you about what you can do, instead of sitting with a closed mind about, oh my god, my child has learning difficulty, and I'm stuck. So it's a mindset shift that is needed. So sorry, just give me a moment. Yeah. So I think learning difficulty by itself is a broad topic, and there are various signs, and there's a checklist which is used uh, by special educators in order to identify. And these were just pointers that were shared in order to kind of understand what is it that teachers can do in terms of remedial measures. So we are not expecting educators to be experts out here and be able to identify maybe a few warning signals if we all are able to identify, and then start working with the child with some of the practical tips that we just shared in this webinar. So that's also good enough to get started with the child before the child reaches to a stage where it goes out of control. Yeah. So we go on to ADHD. Now, it's very easy to term the child as having attention deficit disorder because ADD is a term which is loosely used nowadays. And labeling is something which we as educators need to be very, very careful about, because once you label a child, you're not labeling the child, you're actually demeaning their self esteem by calling them names, or even by labeling them as, you even if you're talking to your fellow teacher and you are labeling that child as having ADD, that is also having an effect on the child. So as educators, we need to be very, very careful about the kind of language we use for our learners and the way we discuss them in the staff room with other fellow educators. So over to you, Shruti, to give a glimpse of what is ADD and what are the practical strategies and tips that educators can take back in their classroom to work with children with attention deficit disorder.
Yeah. So, as you would know and experienced, a child with ADHD is often called like he's driven by a motor, like high energy, out of the seat, um, like always moving, constantly moving around the class. Um, you must have had this in your class, I'm sure, because there are a lot of kids who have it's a spectrum. So some kids have really severe difficulties and they're not able to control themselves at all. Again, like they're not to blame, they're not doing it on purpose. It is a neurological disorder, it's out of their control. They don't have the response inhibition which is required to control ourselves and to regulate our emotions and behavior. These kids don't have that. So it's not their fault that they talk too much or think or talk before thinking. um, they fidget with things, or interrupt others, disturbed others. I'm sure this is
Can't see the screen though. Yeah.
really. Oh, okay. um I am going to try and figure this out once. Just give me a minute. I'm going to try and do it again. Is it working now?
I don't know if it's not working for me. If everyone can see, they can type in the chat box if they can see.
It's working. Dr. Smita said it's working. Great, thank you. Okay, so like I said, it's something that they don't have control over. Though it can be extremely tiring for a teacher to have a kid with severe ADHD in the classroom. ADD is little more silent because these kids would be, just daydreaming or lost in their own world. So they're not disturbing the class. Um, but they're blank, they're looking out of the window, they've blanked out in class, they don't follow instructions very well, they don't complete their work, they don't bring their homework, sometimes they've forgotten their pencil, sometimes they've forgotten their tiffin, sometimes they just seem like they're absent minded, but it's just that they're not very good with keeping things in their mind. They work with very short crisp instructions. Their attention span is really short, so that's why they will not stick to a task for a very long period of time. So now ADHD, often labeled as the troublemaker, it's like I said, it is genetic. There are other causes like environmental factors, brain injury, drug use during pregnancy, and other factors which are responsible for this. But it is just the brain which helps us to plan, organize, focus, have a thinking of consequences. That's kind of absent in them, so they're not able to do the things which others are doing so easily. So from a student's perspective, being labeled ADHD is extremely tough because it's they're not doing it on purpose. They are not throwing temper tantrums because they can, like, they just want to. They feel bad about it, uh, but they're just too used to people blaming them for everything. There was a student in my school. Anything happens, people would blame him or her. So even if the child's really not done it, the others in the class started taking advantage that, okay, we'll just put the blame on this child because anyways he gets picked on for everything. So that's not really fair on them. The child anyways has difficulty maintaining friendship because cannot regulate emotions, is very impulsive. So difficult time in school, they're quite alone, um, and constantly hated by everyone around them. Also, there's a 30% comorbidity that they would have learning difficulties as well, which makes schoolwork even more challenging. um, so life at school is not the easiest for a child with ADHD. So we need to understand that they will grow like out of it. They won't, because it's a neurological disorder. What I mean is that they will be able to manage themselves better once they grow a little older in the secondary section. Fifth standard onwards, they might be able to regulate themselves much, much better. And with the proper help of a counselor, it really helps them to set goals for themselves, to regulate difficult emotions such as anger, to manage bullying, teasing, hitting behavior, because then the counselor works with them and does behavior modification for them. So coming back to what you should do as a teacher, you should reach out to a school counselor, because that's going to help a great deal. Get the child tested for ADHD, because if the child needs medication, then that would help the child uh, pay more attention and to regulate oneself much better. Medications are commonly used for these kids. Speak to the school for help and support. So now, case studies from my school about how the counselors worked with the child. The names have been changed to protect identity, but there's this one student in grade 3 named Akash. Um, so he would constantly be out of his seat. He would get into hitting. He would get into abusing, and not listen to the teacher. Constantly be on the move. Um, so with him, the strategies that were used were, the teacher put up warnings of no hitting, no teasing, no pushing on the board, and she kind of reminded the child that these are the things, and she kept a gesture. So if Akash was doing something which he's not supposed to do, the teacher would just use any gesture, which was mutually agreed upon by Akash and the teacher, so that the teacher didn't have to say in those many words, Akash, don't do, because that's something that the child will start to resent. So they had a gesture, and that's what they used. So after 3 warnings, also, if Akash did not listen to the teacher, there would be a consequence. So the consequence would either be taking something away from Akash, which he really likes to do, or it would be making him sit next to the teacher. So his desk would be pulled out from the class and put next to the teacher, and he used to hate that. So that's something of a negative consequence which he didn't look forward to. So after the second warning, he would kind of calm down a little for some time. Eventually, he did need medication, but because there was a lot of resistance from parents, there were some strategies which were helpful. So what the teacher also did is that, because he had a lot of energy, she would ask him to carry books from help him out carrying books from the staff room to the classroom. So he would get tired carrying those books, or make him do jumping jacks, or just ask him to take a quick round of the floor and come back immediately. And there would be cameras, so the child would know that he's being watched and he needs to come back. So these kind of strategies really helped. He was also asked to sit near the wall with his partner blocking the aisle, so the child could not constantly keep running around. Mm, so these things helped. And with Siddesh, he had a lot of anger issues, also used a lot of bad language, foul language. So with him, what they had done is they would praise him every time he would ask for something. Whether he would raise his hand, they would say, "Good job at raising your hand, Sudesh." They would praise him so that he would like to do those things much more. Um, they would teach The counselor also taught him how to solve a problem, because every time Siddesh faced a problem with other students, he would abuse and fight. So the counselor taught him how to solve the problem rather than get angry and get defensive. The counselor also taught him to set goals for himself. So if this week's goal is that I'm not going to use bad language, the counselor would ask him whether he was able to stick to it the entire day, and ask him what triggered the behavior, if any. And she would also give him like a 3 point system: stop, think, and then act. So this was repeated a lot with him. It was pasted on his desk so he could constantly see it and use it: stop, think, and act. So this really helped Siddesh in changing his behavior. Um, Again, provide front row seating to the child, away from windows, doors, pencil sharpeners, water bottles, whatever distracts the child. Just keep them a little bit away from those things. Provide a buddy who's helpful, but not somebody who also has ADHD straight, so that they would then become like best friends and start creating a lot of chaos in the class. Give short and crisp instructions. Also, don't expect too much from them. Give them short, simple tasks to do. See that they don't bully others. Set rules and boundaries and consequences for inappropriate behavior. Also, a lot of parental intervention would be required. Parents need to be involved. Also asked to communicate constantly with the class teacher on what needs to be done at home for behavior modification as well, and what consequences are being used in school need to be conveyed to the parents so that they also follow more or less on those. um, Also, sometimes the child has sensory needs, so something like using a stress ball in their hand helps them, or a fidget spinner helps them to meet their sensory requirement to constantly keep fidgeting. Allow the child to take short breaks, because it's overwhelming for them to do a lot of content which requires a lot of mental effort. So give them breaks. Um, this reward system might work in some cases. Like in Akash's case, it worked that he was given a star if he's really followed good behavior through the day. So it may or may not work, but can be tried out. Um, so some strategies which parents can also do at home is segregation of chana and rajma seeds to improve the attention span. Like I said, physical tiring out is important because their energy is used. So something like yoga or physical exercise, swimming, running, jumping, trampoline, all of these things help the child to tire out and use up his extra energy. Classroom rules of no hitting, no kicking, no pushing needs to be put up and reminded. Time bound tasks can be used for a child with inattention so that they complete their work. And
We have a
yeah,
question
so
as well.
yeah,
How to create awareness in parents of other students as well. So this is something which is very important and most
right,
often asked in the classroom
right,
by teachers and
absolutely.
parents. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's very pertinent because the other kids start complaining about these students, that this child constantly hits my child, constantly, abuses my child. So there would be complaints. But if the teacher is aware that what is ADHD and what are the challenges that the child is facing with ADHD, so if the teacher understands that this is not in his control, it's not something he's doing on purpose, what are his emotional and needs, so they can be then explained to the parents as well in a PTA or other setup, or
Yeah.
it can be taken up one on one in a meeting. So
Absolutely,
that
and
sort
I
of a,
also think that as schools, as authorities in education, it becomes the school's responsibility to hold, regular talks by inviting doctors, pediatricians, mental health workers, and discuss topic of importance, and also broaden the parents' perspective about children with special needs, because the classroom has a different dynamic. It's not, all the children are not of the same type and same make. So the differences, which are very, very, visible and on the rise now, especially. So we all are aware of that. And instead of reacting to those differences, we need to learn to respond. And also, I think children are best at that. They adapt very well. It's the adults who have issues about how their children are being affected, whereas it's not really the case. Children really adapt well. But again, there needs to be the teacher needs to intervene and also discuss about the different abilities that each and every child has through role playing, through dramatizing, through stories. So it's an ongoing process. It's not like today you explain and tomorrow you're going to see results and everybody, the whole world is going to understand what you said. So I think as an educator it becomes an ongoing process to bring in the element of empathy to different strategies like role play, stories, talks, discussions, and other games format. So it's up to the educator, because if as an educator you're not able to take charge, or you're not able to help your learners, be it the one who is the backbencher or be it the one who's the front one who sits in the front, it can be seen by your learners, and that's where they try to model you. So they feel that if you as a teacher are ignoring that child, then we as learners can also ignore that child. So always be on guard about the way you are treating that particular child in the classroom, the way you speak, your tone when you're speaking to that child. So these are my personal experiences, and that's what I thought that it will help, because this is an ongoing process. Developing empathy, talking to parents is an ongoing process. Yeah. So that's a good question. Thank you so much. Yeah. So any
So,
other question? I'll just check my YouTube. Yeah. So this has been indeed a discussion where a lot of tips were shared by Shruti, and we are thankful to Shruti for actually sharing so many tips and strategies, and all the tips and strategies are very practical, and it's something where we can actually take them to our classroom as educators and try to work around those. Also the mnemonics, the sight words. So all these tips that you shared are really something which the educators can actually go right away, and sight words are something which are commonly used words which we can actually make on cards and stick them in your own classroom, so that children have their own time to look at them, because the more they look at them, the more easy it is for them to remember the spelling, because sight words cannot be spelled phonetically. Yeah. So we also have another question. Any reference material? Yes, there are plenty of reference materials. We also have on our website, which we have shared, and also the MDA website, right, Shruti? Would you like to suggest that?
yes, MDA website has a lot of content. NESSY has a lot of content, NESSY. On the THT website, there's a there's an ebook on dyslexia, which was uploaded.
By you
So that
itself,
is
yes.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, so that is
Yeah.
something they can look at. Also, they can write to me if there is anything more required. We would definitely keep in touch. And a little about medicines advocated for ADHD. You want to get that one?
Medicines, I would say, as educators, I would not want to recommend. It is best left to the doctors, and it is something which is not in our hands to suggest to the parents as well. So, yeah, it's not like over the counter drug that you can just suggest. It's not like a crocin that you can suggest and you will see results. It's based on different parameters, and the dosage is very important, because every child is given a different dosage. Many of the parents also follow alternative therapy, so you could even try alternative therapies. People are also advocating homeopathy, so yeah, for some people it works. So there are different books out here. So, as an educator, it's best to leave such decisions to the doctor. Yeah. Yep, yep. Alternative therapy works well for many, majority, because the rate at which we are experiencing children having learning difficulty, it's almost like 10% of the population, which is diagnosed with learning difficulty. So uh, it is in fact the educator's responsibility to be well aware of. I'm not saying that you need to be aware of all the medical terms, but what you need to be aware of as an educator is what is it that you can do to make that to work with the child and help that child cope better in the classroom. So that's something that we as educators have the responsibility of. And as Shruti has shared so many tips, please do try some of them and get back to us. And we will also be having Shruti hosting other sessions for us in the coming year, where she will also be available to take questions on our Facebook group, which is in the same name, Teachers Help Teachers. So she will be available, and she will be more than happy to take any questions from anyone who watches this video at a later point in time as well. And you can also write to Shruti or write to us about anything that you would want us to host separately as a topic in detail, so we can even look into that, because today was a session as described. It's a Wednesday session. It's all about sharing, and it's not about teaching us as such. It's about sharing what Shruti does. Yeah. So thank you everybody for being here and asking questions. I think it is when you ask a question is when you are actually thinking and learning. So thank you so much for showing us that you were with us, because in the virtual world it's kind of a little confusing to understand who's with us and who's not with us. So thank you, Shruti, for being here and sharing your valuable time and strategies and tips and all that you do as a remedial educator, because these are the tips that we always want to hear from our fellow educators, and also know more about what can be done. So we hope that you will be available to answer questions which would be asked on a YouTube channel and on the Facebook community group. And in case there is any other question, you can even write to us. If you don't want to ask on the group or YouTube, you can even write back to us and we will have it answered.
Absolutely. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this.
Yeah, we had a wonderful session, and I hope all of you did. In case any one of you would like to come up and share your knowledge or your expertise about anything that you have been doing, you can write to us at contact@teachershelpteachers.in, and we will be more than happy to have you on board to share your knowledge with your fellow educators. So thank